You know what's scary? Most Singaporeans still think buying an HDB today works the same way it worked 5 or 10 years ago. It doesn't. The rules changed. The psychology changed. And honestly, the entire upgrading game that Singaporeans grew up believing in is slowly being dismantled right in front of our eyes. Because for decades, the formula was simple. Apply BTO, wait patiently, collect keys, stay 5 years, sell for profit, upgrade condo. That was the Singapore middle-class wealth creation machine. And for a very long time, it worked beautifully. But now, the government has fundamentally changed the board game. Not slightly, fundamentally. And the scary part is this. A lot of buyers still do not understand what they are actually signing up for. Because when people hear 10-year lock-in, they think it's just another cooling measure. It's not. It is a complete restructuring of mobility, flexibility, liquidity, and future upgrading power.
This is no longer just about buying a home. You are now making a decade-long life commitment based on who you think you will become in the future. And that is an extremely dangerous assumption, because human beings are terrible at predicting their future selves. Let me explain. Today, a 26-year-old newly married couple walks into a sales gallery for a prime location HDB. Everything looks perfect. Near MRT, near town, beautiful amenities, amazing food nearby, maybe one future child. Life feels manageable. Then reality hits. Year 3, one kid arrives. Year 5, career changes. Year 7, second child. Year 8, parents getting older. Year 9, need helper. Suddenly that perfect flat becomes physically too small for your actual life. But you cannot move. You are trapped inside a decision made by a younger version of yourself. That is the brutal truth nobody wants to talk about. The new HDB system is no longer optimized for flexibility. It is optimized for stability. And stability sounds good in theory, until your real life changes faster than your property timeline. That's where the pressure starts. Because Singapore's new HDB framework now separates flats into 3 categories: standard, plus, prime. And the closer you get to desirable city fringe or central locations, the stricter the rules become. The government basically said, if you want heavily subsidized prime real estate, you must sacrifice mobility. That's the trade. You get location, but you lose flexibility. And honestly, a lot of buyers are massively underestimating how painful that trade becomes over time. Because 10 years sounds short when you are emotionally excited during application. But 10 years is a very long time in real life. Think about your own life 10 years ago. You were probably a completely different person. Different income, different goals, different relationships, different priorities. Yet today's buyers are making decade-long property commitments while assuming life will remain stable. That assumption alone is dangerous. And here's where things become even more financially brutal. Most Singaporeans still think, never mind lah, even if I'm locked in, at least can make money later. That old thinking may no longer work the same way, because now we need to talk about subsidy recovery. This is where many buyers completely misunderstand the math. Historically, the old HDB upgrade strategy created enormous wealth acceleration. Why? Because buyers enjoyed government subsidies up front, then sold later at huge profits. The government looked at that and basically said, we are subsidizing homes, not creating lottery tickets. So now, for plus and prime flats, part of that subsidy gets clawed back when you sell. Meaning, the moment you exit, the government takes a percentage back from your resale proceeds. And psychologically, that changes everything. Because buyers keep looking at the future selling price, but they fail to calculate the actual cash left after. Outstanding loan, CPF refund, accrued interest, legal fees, agent fees, and subsidy recovery. The headline selling price becomes meaningless. What matters is net usable proceeds. That is the real number. And many future sellers are going to get a shock when they realize the profit feels far smaller than expected, especially after holding for an entire decade. Now let's talk about another major issue nobody discusses enough: cash overvaluation, COV. This is where the resale market becomes brutal for younger Singaporeans. Because many buyers think, if the bank approves my loan, I can afford the property. Wrong. That is not how reality works anymore. Imagine this. Seller wants $800,000.
But official HDB valuation comes back at $740,000. That $60,000 difference? Cash. Pure cash. Cannot use loan. Cannot fully use CPF. Cold, hard liquidity. And this is where many middle-income families get crushed. Not because they lack income, but because they lack liquidity. That is a huge difference. And when you combine 10-year lock-in, subsidy recovery, rising COV, higher interest rates, and tighter affordability, you realize something terrifying. Singapore property today is no longer a simple wealth accumulation game. It has become a capital management game. The winners moving forward are not necessarily the people earning the highest income. It's the people with the strongest financial discipline and longest term planning. That is the shift happening right now. And honestly, I think this is going to completely reshape buyer psychology over the next decade. Because the old generation viewed HDB as a stepping stone, but the next generation may start viewing HDB as a permanent lifestyle decision. That changes everything. Now here's another uncomfortable truth. Many Singaporeans are still buying based on FOMO, fear of missing out. And this is extremely dangerous in a locked-in environment. Because FOMO works temporarily, but lock-ins are permanent. People panic. Wah, if never buy now, next time cannot afford already. So they rush, they compromise, they overstretch. And emotionally, they justify everything because everyone else around them is doing the same thing. But property decisions made under emotional urgency are usually the most financially painful ones later, especially when your flexibility disappears. Because once you are locked in, you are locked in. Your future self inherits the consequences. And this becomes especially dangerous when buyers underestimate how fast life evolves. Jobs change, industries collapse, children arrive, health issues happen, parents age, marriage dynamics change. And suddenly, your perfect location no longer solves your actual life problems. This is why I believe the new HDB era requires a completely different mindset. You cannot buy emotionally anymore. You need to buy strategically. You need to think beyond Instagram-worthy locations and MRT convenience. You need to ask deeper questions. Can this home realistically support my life for the next 12 years? Can my finances survive interest rate fluctuations? Am I overpaying because of fear? What happens if my income changes? What happens if my family structure changes? What happens if upgrading later becomes impossible? These are the questions serious buyers need to ask now, because the cost of getting property decisions wrong today is significantly higher than before. And honestly, I think many Singaporeans still haven't emotionally accepted that reality yet. We are still mentally operating using old property rules in a completely different market environment. That disconnect is dangerous. Now, does this mean HDB is bad? Absolutely not. Singapore HDB remains one of the most successful public housing systems in the world. Safe environment, strong infrastructure, high ownership rates, excellent urban planning. But the strategy behind buying HDB has changed dramatically. This is no longer about fast flipping. This is about long-term life alignment. And buyers who fail to understand that shift are going to struggle. Because moving forward, the biggest risk in Singapore property may no longer be price crashes. It may actually be lifestyle mismatch. Buying the wrong property for the wrong phase of life. That is the silent killer now. And I'll say something controversial. I think the next generation of wealthy Singaporeans will not necessarily be the people who bought the most expensive homes. It will be the people who preserved the most flexibility. Because flexibility has become an asset. Liquidity has become an asset. Optionality has become an asset. And in an increasingly uncertain world, being trapped is expensive. Very expensive. So before you rush into your next HDB decision, slow down. Ignore the hype. Ignore the pressure. Ignore what everyone else is doing. And brutally stress test your future life, not your current emotions. Because the person signing the OTP today is not the same person who must live with the consequences 10 years later. And that distinction might quietly determine whether your next property decision becomes your greatest financial foundation or your biggest lifestyle regret. If this episode gave you a completely different perspective on Singapore's changing HDB landscape, make sure you subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with someone currently planning to buy their first home. Because honestly, most buyers are still using outdated strategies in a market that already changed. And that knowledge gap can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you want a deeper breakdown on upgrading strategies, resale opportunities, or how to position yourself correctly in Singapore's next property cycle, feel free to connect with me directly. This is M, and remember, in today's market, the biggest property mistake is not buying too late. It is locking yourself into the wrong life.